Hello everyone! Today's joke of the day is, what key has legs and can't open doors? Stay tuned to find out. Our learning target for today is I can recognize and use the properties of real numbers. So let's first talk about what the properties are. The commutative property says numbers can be added or multiplied in any order. For example, 5 plus 3 can also be written as 3 plus 5. Okay? Doesn't matter which order they're written in. Doesn't matter which one we do first. Another example would be 2 times 3 is equal to 3 times 2. Okay? You can add or multiply numbers in any order. One final example, negative a times b is the same as b times negative a. Okay? Now let's think about maybe something that would not be an example of this. So it says numbers can be added or multiplied in any order, but this doesn't apply for subtraction or division. Okay? So if we had 5 minus 3, that would not be equal to 3 minus 5. Okay? We can even think about that, right? 5 minus 3 would be equal to 2, and 3 minus 5 is equal to negative 2. Those two things are not equal to each other, okay? So that would not be an example of when we can use the commutative property. Now the associative property tells us that numbers can be added or multiplied regardless of the parentheses. Okay, that means we don't really have to consider the parentheses if we're only adding or only multiplying. Okay, but I'm going to make this note right over here that you must have the same operation throughout. So if you had some adding and some multiplying, then that wouldn't work. Okay, so it would have to be all adding or all multiplying. Okay. So then let's think about some examples here. If we had 5 plus 3 in parentheses, and then we're going to add 8, that would actually still be the same thing as doing 5 plus, and then in parentheses, 3 plus 8. Okay, so I could add 3 and 8 first, or I could add 5 and 3 first, and then add the other number, and it would be the exact same thing. Okay, this works for multiplying too. So we could have 2 times 4 times 9 in parentheses, and that would be equal to 2 times 4 in parentheses times 9. Okay. So it doesn't matter which order we do that in. One way that I can kind of think of this as, like, it doesn't matter which numbers associate with each other. Like, it's the associative property. Okay, they like might associate themselves differently. Okay. Some non-examples would be if we had 3 times 2 plus 5, which would not be equal to 3 times 2 plus 5. Okay, that's that thing with the must have the same operation throughout. Okay, those two things would not be equal. Also, this doesn't work with subtraction. So if we had 5 minus 3 minus 8, that would not be the same thing as in parentheses 5 minus 3 minus 8. Okay? All right, then this next one we're going to look at is the identity property. So here it says identify property. It's actually the identity property. Okay? And that says that adding by 0 and multiplying by 1 does not change the value of a number. So, for example, 3 plus 0 equals 3, and a times 1 equals a. This one you probably see all the time and is very familiar to you, okay? But it's called the identity property. It actually has a name, so that's pretty cool. All right, the distributive property is also one that you are aware of. We've talked about that one before, okay? That says that when multiplying by a number, or multiplying a number by a sum, you can multiply each part by the number, okay? So if we had 3 times 2 plus 8, that would be equal to 3 times 2 plus 3 times 8. Okay, that's something we've seen before. Maybe we've seen it in the form of like an expression. So we had like 3 times x plus 2, okay, and we wanted to distribute that. So that would be equal to 3 times x plus 3 times 2, okay? So we just distribute that number that we are multiplying by. The next property is the additive inverse, which says that adding any number and its opposite, so think negative, or if it was a negative, think positive, results in 0. Okay, so for example, 5 plus negative 5 equals 0. That should also be something that's pretty familiar, okay, the additive inverse. Then we also have the multiplicative inverse, okay? We can't just multiply by the opposite. That wouldn't give us 1, okay? That's really what we were looking for. But we multiply by the inverse. And this is something that we do with fractions, right? So think reciprocal. Okay, multiplying by the inverse or reciprocal results in 1. Okay, so for example, 3 times 1/3 equals 1. Or 1/2 times 2 equals 1. Okay? We also have the multiplicative property of 0, which says that multiplying by 0 always equals 0. Okay, that's something you are definitely familiar with. 5 times 0 is always going to equal 0. A times 0 equals 0. Doesn't matter what number we're multiplying by. If we multiply by 0, it always equals 0. Okay, our final property is called the reflexive property, and it says that any number equals itself. Might seem pretty obvious, right? Like obviously -2 equals -2, and A equals A, okay? But that's called the reflexive property, and that's how it works. So now we're going to look at some examples and try and identify which property is being used. In this first example, we have 3 plus 8 and equals 8 plus 3, okay? They switch the order of these two numbers, which is the commutative property. Okay, if we look at this next one, 2 plus 8 times 3 in parentheses equals, in parentheses, 2 plus 8 plus 3. Okay, they're associating them differently, so that's going to be the associative property. Seven plus 0 equals 7. Well, that will be the additive identity. Anything plus 0 is going to equal that itself. And then this one, -8 times 1 equals -8. That will be the multiplicative identity. Okay, A times B times C in parentheses equals A times B times C. Okay, with the parentheses around the B times the C and then the A times the B. This is going to be the associative property, but with multiplication. Associative property. 9 times 1 over 9 equals 1. That will be the multiplicative inverse. A times 1 equals A. That's the multiplicative identity again. t plus v equals v plus t. That will be the commutative property. Okay. R times 0 equals 0. That's the multiplicative property of 0. Multiplicative property, I'll just say prop of 0. 3 times 10 plus 5 equals 3 times 10 plus 3 times 5. That's the distributive property. Six plus negative 6 equals 0. That's our additive inverse. Basically, inverse meaning that you undo the thing that you were trying to do. So if we were trying to add 6, to undo it, okay? And we've done that when solving equations. If 7 equals 7, that's our reflexive property, the one that seems really obvious. Okay, b times 1 over b equals 1. That's, again, our multiplicative inverse. And then we have x plus y plus c equals x plus y plus c. Okay, switching the parentheses, that's our associative property. Okay, and finally, we have this last challenge problem. 4 plus, in parentheses, 5 plus 2 equals 4 plus, in parentheses, 2 plus 5. Well, really, this looks like it should be maybe associative property because there are parentheses. But we're not changing the numbers that we're adding, right? Like, we're not adding 4 plus 5 and then in the second one, right? In first, right? So what we're really changing is this 5 plus 2 and this 2 plus 5. Okay, we're actually flipping those around. So this is going to be the commutative property. Okay, well, the answer to our joke of the day. What key has legs and can't open doors? A turkey. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.